Hello and welcome back to On Air with Dr. Pete. I'm your host, Dr. Pete Economo, and oh my God, do I have a show for you today. Nikki Boyer is here, and we go back in like the early 2000s when she was working with my best friend and now the podcast producer, Lee, and we were in Philly, and I was just telling her that I stumbled upon this podcast, Dying for Sex, which was on Wondery. So let me just tell you a little bit about Nikki before we get into that. So she's a 3-time Emmy Award winner, writer, actress, producer, and founder of Dying for Media. She co-produced the smash hit podcast, Dying for Sex, alongside her beloved friend Molly, who we're going to talk about, who was diagnosed with terminal cancer at the age of 42. And so she lived her own terms, and this really was what spoke to me by exploring her sexcapades, if you will. And she truly was life, and Nikki and Molly documented that together, which then became this FX series, Dying for Sex. So it's currently airing on Hulu, and I'm thrilled, Nikki, that you're here today. Welcome. How can this be 20 years ago that we first met?
First of all, you look good. You don't look like you've aged. We haven't seen each other since we were in our early 20s, which is great. I'm a little older than you, but
much.
I'm so happy to see you. And any chance that I get to talk about this experience and I get to talk about Molly, it makes me so happy. So what a bonus. I get to talk about an old friend and my best friend.
Well, I'm not a great friend, though, because we haven't talked in a while. And
well, like 20 years.
And I forgot what show. So we were just putting this together before we got on air about like the show. So this was like you said it was one of your first jobs that you were working on.
Yeah. When I moved to LA, I auditioned for a show called Perfect Proposal on TLC, where at the time it was mainly men that were proposing to their girlfriends. I would love to do it modern day and do it now. It would be so fun. Totally. But they were these crazy, wonderful surprise proposals, and we would create a ruse around it, and I would be involved. So I got to be a part of like, I don't even know, like 100 marriage proposals. I think we did like, I mean, I did so many episodes for a few years. I was running around this whole country. Yeah. But that was the show. It was Perfect Proposal. So I think that's how we met. You weren't proposing to me, but you know, you were, I think, auditioning for something, right?
That's what Lee said. So
Let's go with that.
Let's go with that because my memory doesn't always serve me. But so 20 years and then this podcast, a lot has happened. So
right.
Right. But so I was telling you before we got on that the podcast really just fell in my lap because Wondery, I think, does a wonderful job.
I know, right?
And I really, really loved it. Like, so for me, I'm just so happy to have you here because as a psychologist, you have helped so many people. Do you know that?
That's so nice. No, I mean, I guess kind of. I'm from the DMs I'm getting on Instagram. I can feel the ripple effect is pretty profound. So I think I have an idea, but tell me more.
So from, the messages that I heard, and before I even watched the series, the messages were about, living in the present moment. Yeah. It was about letting go of social anxiety. It was letting go of stigma. It was letting go of perception, these roles gender roles, this, if you talked about modern day proposals, modern day woman, like, that you empower people to be who they were in that story. And Molly, and I think a lot of people are afraid of death.
Oh my gosh. No, it's the one thing that for sure is going to happen to all of us, yet we just don't talk about it culturally, spiritually. We don't even really talk about it in terms of like religion. We talk about it, but it's very factual and it's very like detached. And I found that so interesting, that one thing that connects us all, that we can for sure say that we're all going to have an experience that's similar, is that it's death, but we don't ever talk about it. So with Molly, she really did teach me that you could lean into that and have really fun conversations. And I don't know if I would have been where I am now in that journey if I wouldn't have had her in my life to show me that.
Where were you in your life in that regard, spiritually, around death, before Molly was diagnosed?
My dad had passed away in 2005. Oh my God. Yes, it was while I was doing Perfect Proposal. I had to leave the show for like a good 3 weeks to be there with my dad when he died. So I lost my dad. My dad was only 50, which is weird because I'm about to turn 50 and I was 30. Yeah. So I love uncomfortable things.
What?
I
Says nobody ever.
Right. I loved to be around when things are messy. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I just enjoyed chaos as a kid, but I like to navigate people and say, okay, this is really uncomfortable. This is weird. I get it.
Yeah.
Let's kind of reset. And can we mindfully do this together? That always doesn't work super well with my family. But I have to say, I just really craved doing that, which is, I mean, I have to tell you, Pete, like I really thought for a minute that I would be a psychologist or go into mental health. And I was a life coach for 2 or 3 years. And I did answer the phones at the suicide prevention center when people were suicidal. I would answer the call. That was over COVID.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I went through the training and I did that. And the one response that I got from my mentors, they were amazing, by the way, amazing humans that work at the suicide prevention center. They were like, you stay on the calls for way too long. If they're not high risk, Nikki, you have to get off the phone. And I would be like, but Gary and I are best friends now. I don't want to get off the phone. So then I went into life coaching because I thought, oh, then I can have more time with my clients. And then the show kind of kicked off. But I have to say, doing this with Molly felt like an extension of that work that I was doing. So yeah, I love to talk about uncomfortable
I guess
things.
that makes sense then to how I felt. Like I think the education that you gave people, thank you. Maybe I should have known that about you, but that
I mean, how would you? Yeah.
Well, but that helps to know because I actually in class last night we were talking about sometimes they have to keep people on hold in the suicide hotline.
Yes, right. Yeah.
That's really not great.
Well, there's a hotline,
right.
and that's if you are really feeling like you are going to kill yourself. And then there is the warm line, which is where you can call when you're having ideation, when you're feeling like you're considering it, but you want to just really check in and talk with somebody. And so I would have been great on the warm lines.
Yeah. Well, now, I mean, thankfully people had you there, but so when Molly was diagnosed, you know, so you had gone through a little bit of your own journey around your dad's death.
Yeah.
You had been a life coach. You had done the suicide hotline, right? You had already done that.
You know what?
Sorry, timeline. I know.
No, it's actually really valuable for me to go back. My dad had passed. I was with him when he died. It was a 3-day process. Wow. I was very present during that.
Yeah.
And so I thank my dad always. I'm like, thank you for giving me like the roadmap to how to be with Molly. I thank my dad for that all the time. I think I had gone through. Yes, because Molly would be like, what are you doing today? Can you come to the hospital? And I'd be like, I have to go answer the phones at the suicide prevention center. And she'd be like,
She made fun of it.
She'd be like, what's more important, strangers that might die or your best friend? And I'd be like, we would laugh and have such a morbid conversation, but then I would go to the hospital right after. So it was during the same time, Pete. Thank you. Because I don't think I remembered that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, well, and maybe that set you up a little bit, like to kind of understand that there's endings. And, you know, to say it's universal is like really intellectual, you know, because it is universal. And we all know that. It's like, what do they say? Like taxes and death. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
But death is, so, you know, here, especially in the West, like we don't accept death in a positive way. But I really feel, and, you know, listening to Molly on your podcast, now you can document that for the rest of your life.
Isn't she just,
that.
Oh gosh, isn't she cool?
Special.
Very, I mean,
different.
Very. Yeah. And I think
it.
the cancer gave her, she says in her book, and I'm going to paraphrase, but she would never have lived the life that she was living if it wouldn't have been for the cancer. I gave her this sort of permission to be and do and be super, super authentic and be really rooted in her own body. And I think that's the takeaway from this. Sometimes I'm like, I want people to feel that before they get a diagnosis or something that happens to them. Like,
but we don't.
No.
And so I'm going to ask you this.
We don't.
Well, and I feel bad even asking you this. Like,
why?
do you feel like you have? You know, because I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because.
Yeah, no, I love this.
Okay, I love what you just said, and it does take that diagnosis often. And my goal is always, how do we get there without the diagnosis?
Right.
Because if we're truly living mindfully,
right,
we would have these sexcapades. I think.
I think so too.
Okay.
I would hope for all. That's now that I have been through it with her, I don't think I could ever fully implement the place that she was in into my life, right? Because there's a difference between thinking about dying and actually knowing that you're dying. It just resonates in your body differently. But I often say, like, what would Molly do? Oh, wait, let me check in. Let me do a check.
Yeah.
Let me pull myself down. You know, I'm up here and I'm vibrating and I'm like anxious and I'm watching myself and I'm 2 steps ahead and I'm all over the place. And often I think, I do this with my husband sometimes where like we get into a bicker, we're bickering and we fight.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what if something happened to him on the way home from the grocery store? And that's how I chose to navigate this day with him.
Right.
So I have to say that it's a little bit fear-based for me, but it's also reality of like, at any point, one of us could die. And what do we want to do with that time that we have with those people? Do we want to fight about the laundry? Do we want to bitch about whatever? Do we want to be super present and super loving and soak them up? So as much as I would love to say that I'm always like that, I'm not, but I often say, well, what would Molly do? Or what has this experience given me so that I can now like put those goggles on and go, let's get real about what's happening here. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
It does. And I think that's what I was almost fear-based for me listening was that like she was dying, and what I tell people when I've described this podcast to others, I'm like, you hear the change in her voice,
totally.
From episode 1 to 6. And, you kind of see death, you hear death, like, what it's like. And so you just said about like sort of hypothetical death versus like the intellectual versus emotional, like, and that's why I think Molly was so different because for her, like you recorded in the hospital. We
did. Sorry, I just burped.
Let it out.
Really classy gal. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
We did. We recorded a lot of the sexcapades and funny little kinks and fetishes that she did in a little recording studio.
Yeah.
And I could see even the decline of her now that I'm looking back. In the moment, I wasn't super aware of it. When I look back at those recording sessions. And then when she got into the hospital, we thought, oh, it's just a moment in time. She's just going to go in. She'll come back out because this is how it goes. And then I think at the end of December, very early January of the year that she died, I was like, oh, she's not coming out. And so I said, are you willing to record some more? And she was like, yes. Amazing. But she was very thoughtful about when we recorded what it is that she wanted to say. So she was a writer. So I think she thought a lot about like what those recordings were going to be like. And so we did them very few, but they were incredibly profound, as you know.
Incredibly.
Right.
Well, even like, I think it was one of the last episodes she talked about Charmed, and she was like,
the TV show. Yeah.
Yeah. She was like, this means nothing now. And again, I think that's why this helps people because, they always say that the last moments in life are like the best moments in life, and that you don't have fear about the future.
Oh my God. I never thought of it that way.
That's
gosh.
That's the Eastern sort of gift to us. It's like you're so present. And so that's what so for me, like with the psychology and the Zen stuff, I'm like, that's what I was hearing in her voice. And
that's beautiful.
The charm stuff, I was like, dope, because that's right. You can't relate to it because you're not future oriented.
Right. Yes. You're taking away like you can't, you have to be present because there's no thinking ahead. Like Oh, wow. That's cool. I love that.
So, I mean, I have a lot of stuff to break down for this. I hope that's okay.
Are you kidding? These are my favorite kinds of conversations. And by the way, sometimes I'm really, really aware of what I'm saying. And other times I feel like I'm talking out of my ass. I'm like, I don't know so I'm just going to be honest with you. If I have a good answer or a good thought, but if I don't, I'm just going to be honest and be like, I don't know. I have no idea.
I love authenticity.
Right.
That's your value. Well, the other piece of it that I thought was really helpful for others was, the very powerful scenes in her talking about her stepdad, because there's, the stats around sexual assault and.
Oh, her mom's boyfriend. Yeah. He was,
okay.
Yeah, he was like a visitor. He was like, yeah, she never had a stepdad. But the guy that was her mom's boyfriend, that was just, the sexual assault.
And you talking to her mom about that. I mean, that.
So brave for her to come and talk to me. She was just amazing.
For you.
Oh, thanks.
Like, I mean, it's brave. You have to realize that for you to make that call is also brave.
Thanks for saying that.
No, it is. And then for Molly to talk about it and, that the last scene of the series, I don't want to give too much away, but like, I think just some of the power of like our younger selves and what trauma does to us and how our brain is. And I think that probably played a part into living this way too.
100%. Yeah.
Okay. So you would think so.
I do think, well, she says so she wrote, her memoir that I published on Amazon is called Screw Cancer, Becoming Whole. She wrote the memoir while she was dying in the hospital those last 3 months. And the book, I think, is a little bit of a darker look, kind of a sort of a love letter to herself, I think. And she says when that assault happened to her when she was very young, like she split into two.
Yeah, that's what
And
happens.
I think when she was dying, she was becoming whole again and figuring out how to merge those pieces of herself, so she acknowledged that a lot of the sexual escapades were a healing of her body, staying rooted in her body, and also having a lot of fun, and also kind of reclaiming the things that sexually got to happen to her. Like she got to decide. And I found that to be really powerful.
Oh my, yeah, very powerful. And you know, so the mix of like depth with humor, you know, I think that was you guys, I mean, that was, and your connection was just like Toyota guy Scott. I mean, I just was dying.
Don't we love him?
I was dying.
I'm still friends with him. Like we communicate on a regular basis because he was one of the first guys that she hooked up with. So I had to go way back in the Rolodex and dig and find him. Now this is after Molly had died. So we had these recordings and then we took the podcast to Wondery and I said, Molly is not well. And this is a cool Wondery story. You're going to die when you hear this. Molly and I had recorded. She got into the hospital. We continued to record. I had all of these like 10 episodes of her sexual escapades. And I thought, I just want to get them out into the world before she dies. Like, should I just put them up on a YouTube channel? Like, what do I do with this? And I reached out to the CEO, Hernan Lopez of Wondery. And I said, hey, I met you in passing years ago. I have this project. I never heard back from him. And so here I am about to launch this podcast on YouTube, which I knew nothing about podcasts. I knew nothing really about YouTube either at the time. And I'm like, I'm going to reach out one more time to him. And I just said, hey, I didn't hear back from you. I'm going to release this tomorrow because I want her to know what's in the world before she passes. These are the episodes. Let me know if you're interested. And he responded very quickly and said, I never got your first email. So that's a good lesson. Always send follow up.
Totally.
Always. And then he said, don't release this. I would love to take a meeting with you. So I went to the Wondery offices. I met him. Now he's one of my best friends. It was at my wedding. Like I love this man. And he came to the hospital and he met Molly and he sat with her on Valentine's Day, about 3 weeks before she died. And he said, I really want to tell this story and I'm going to help you. And Nikki and I are going to figure this out together. So just know that I'm going to do everything I can to get your story out there. And he
did it.
I mean, he pioneered this and brought it into Wondery and paired me up with my amazing executive producer, Stephanie Jens. And so Molly passed knowing that her story was going to be in the hands of Wondery and that we were going to do something really great together. So how great is that? Like that's really
I mean, you
cool.
gave her lots of gifts. I mean, I just want to say that too. Obviously she gave a lot to you, but I think there's not a lot of people that would put their life on hold. That's my story. Like that's the perception I have. There's not a lot of people that would sort of put their life on hold or, you know, even for family members, let alone best friends.
You know, it's interesting you say that. Looking back, my husband really gave me that permission. And I know that sounds a little weird, but like, I just kept looking for like what answers, like, what do I do here? And this is how it's different than the TV show actually, because we were about 6 years into our relationship and he just knew, I think he could see what I couldn't. And he was like, that's where you need to be. That's where you need to be. Go. If there's ever a choice of coming home to hang out with me and the kids, because I have 2 stepdaughters that I helped raise. He's like, if you ever have the choice should always be to go see Molly. And there were times when it was messy and that I was frustrated and venting to other friends. Like, it's never enough. I go all the time and like, it just never feels like it's enough. I'm not doing a good enough job. And if it were up to her, I would have just been there for 3 months straight. Like she loved having me around and I've never been like, she really loved me, Pete, like deeply loved me. And like, she wanted me around all the time. So I went through a lot of times of feeling very torn, but I have to say, it did feel like the right place to be with her. I don't know why. I don't know if I would have done it for anyone else other than my husband, but she's a pretty special,
it's
unique
another lesson
person.
for people to live in the moment because your gut was telling you that, or, you know, in addition to his gut telling him that this was the right place for my wife or girlfriend to be, like, you have to listen to your gut. And I don't think a lot of us build connection with our gut enough to know that it's there telling us that.
Yeah.
So another thing that stood out to me as a healthcare provider was the annoyance of a physician telling her that she's too young to have breast cancer when she felt the first lump. And I felt ashamed to be a part of the healthcare system, you know, and
well, because you're such a sweet soul and such an empath. You're like, I felt ashamed. I'm like, I don't even know if I've ever heard
Oh,
another
that's
doctor say that. That's so sweet. That's so sweet. It really is, though. But we shared the same
wow.
OBGYN. And so it was interesting. We both went to the same
Yeah.
doctor because we loved him and thought
Best
he was
friend referral, no
amazing.
better than that. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So she actually got me in with him. And then when she, I continued to go to him after he had said to her, it's nothing, you're
Yeah.
fine, you're too young for breast cancer. We both continued to go
Right.
see him because
You wouldn't have
we
known.
were sort of had this, we didn't know. And now looking back, I'm like, oh my God, always get a second
Yes.
opinion. If you feel something,
Yes.
go get your mammogram, get your ultrasound, advocate, call your insurance company,
Yes.
do all of that. But yeah, Molly didn't really, she had a lot of regret about not following up and not trusting her own gut and
She didn't.
listening to,
Yeah. But
oh God, when you
yeah.
think about the similarities about like
Yeah.
your abuser,
Well, I
quote
love that you
unquote,
guys do that
right?
connection.
Who,
I mean, I hate to use the
yeah,
word love, but I thought that was a beautiful way of connecting that. And
yeah,
yeah, that was
yeah.
does the hospice nurse really that silly? Amy?
The hospice nurse
Yeah,
Amy
yeah,
in the FX show
yeah,
is Paula Pell, who is one of the
yeah.
best humans ever. And she's kind of a combination of 3 or
Okay,
4
yeah,
hospice nurses and also inspired by someone named hospice
yeah.
nurse Julie, who's really popular on TikTok and who
Oh,
normalizes talking about death.
yeah,
She's a hospice nurse. So it was kind of this
yeah,
combination of characters, but it's one of my favorite speeches in the
yeah.
history of
Oh,
television
yeah,
because I
yeah,
feel like it talks about death
yeah.
in a way and really educates people about what death is, what your body's doing when it dies, and that it knows how to die, and that here's what the breathing will
Yes,
sound like. And I've never heard anybody really
yeah.
explain that to me.
And yeah,
It was
and it
really
was
cool.
a combination of people. I mean, the casting was amazing. Michelle Williams, Jenny Slate. What was it
I
like working with them?
know. Oh my God. It was like kind of mind blowing and amazing. My showrunners, Liz Merriweather and Kim Rosenstock, first of all, you don't get
Yeah,
any better than that. So they really involved me in the writer's room. I got to be a part of it. We spent hours and hours and hours working together. So when I showed up on set, that was my first time meeting Jenny and
oh,
Michelle, right? Because we trusted
yeah,
our casting directors. They knew exactly what they were doing. Michelle was very passionate
yeah.
about playing Molly. And so when I met them, it just felt like Pete, it just felt like me and Molly. Like
No
it felt
way.
like we were there. I was like watching them act, but I felt us there. And that's due to the amazing writing and the
Yeah.
amazing acting and getting the tone
Oh,
really,
it was
really right.
spot on. And you made your cameo. You're
I
I
did. I was
loved it.
cousin Sheila. I brought in a casserole
you,
to the chemo room, which is
I
what
mean,
you should always do is bring food into a room where people are nauseous and getting chemo.
and then the dog comes in for the fetish. And again,
Yes. And that is
I
that
believe
was a
it.
real
You know,
fetish.
look, nothing
Yeah.
nothing ever surprises me with my line of work.
I bet
Oh,
you've
there's
heard
nothing
it
I haven't
all.
heard. What a
Wait, I am kind of
what?
dying to know. Is there when you hear about other, because I was in this
Yeah.
position with Molly, is there ever a time that you hear about someone's like sexual interests or fetishes and you feel your judgment coming because you're like, whoa, that's so not in my realm. But then you have the
Yeah.
doctor brain, right? But human brain at the same time. Have you ever had one that you were like, what do I do with that?
I mean,
Where does
thankfully, I
that
was
come from?
trained for many years with cameras on me to look at my nonverbals and verbals, and I mean, I've heard like
Oh, really?
lamps used for masturbation, and latex stuff. I mean, really, you name it, I've heard it. Oh yeah,
Lamps?
So you know what my intervention was there? You make sure it's unplugged.
Yeah.
Like it's like that non-judgment.
As your
You
doctor.
just want to be safe. You do like a risk assessment. That's it, right? Like you do what you want to. You live
Right.
your life, but are you doing it safely? That's all. That's the non-judgmental brain.
Lamp. I will never look at my lamps again. Same.
You're welcome. Use that. Yeah, but so I mean, but I really appreciated that about the podcast and the show. Just trying to normalize
Yeah.
fetishes. I mean, I think the world and especially today, like we're just trying. It's sort of like weeds or Handmaid's Tale. Like the world is just like everyone's trying
Yeah.
to fit into something, or like
I think that's a really good point about fetishes. I was a little judgy about some certain things, and Molly just really, really schooled me and was like, we are all in
Yes.
this together. We are all figuring out, as long as you're safe and you're not harming anyone, like there should be, like, I think our showrunners did a great job in like shedding
Yeah.
some of that shame for female
Totally.
sexuality and owning things in your body. And oftentimes to find out what you like, you have to try 20 things that
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
don't like. And I just think, I hope people can lean into a little bit of that and maybe, I don't know, explore a little bit and take some risks and try some new stuff. It doesn't have to be sexually. It could
A
be
new food.
anything you want it to, but just like try, right? Exactly.
Yes.
Like try
It's not
shit.
that
Why
hard.
not?
So, we look at
I
like
know.
rigidity, and we try and create flexibility, cognitive and psychological. And I think that's what your show did.
Yeah.
It helps people,
Oh, wow.
different
That's really
perspectives,
cool.
like being able to say, why? Because what I want listeners to hear is like, why wait until you have a death sentence to then explore how you want to live fully? And
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's cheesy, but like literally picture yourself and say, if a doctor told me tomorrow you have 24 months to live, what would you do in those 24 months? And like, why not? Like, why not have that conversation with yourself and do that now? Like, what are you waiting for? Like, obviously, like money is always like, there's things you can't do without like the finances, but why not go, okay, how do I make that a priority? Because if that's something that I want to do before I die, why am I waiting until I'm like 82 and too tired to do it?
I think that's what Alanis Morissette, in the, like you waited the whole life to take that flight.
Wait, the old man turned 98. He won the lottery and died the next day. Remember that line?
Yeah.
That one stuck with me.
So don't wait for that. Don't wait.
Yeah, don't wait.
I can't believe we're coming to the end because I could talk to you forever. Yes, we are. It's so sad. I want to keep going. But I know you've got things to do, and I want you to rest.
Can we do a part
2, 3, 4, whatever you want to do. But so Dying for Sex, I know you could get that in Wondery, anywhere you listen to your podcast. You also have the FX series on Hulu, Dying for Sex. I really, really encourage everyone to listen to that. We'll put links in the show notes. Also, Screw Cancer Becoming Whole. That's the book.
Yeah,
I did not check that out yet, but I'm going to because I love.
Okay.
So you want to tell a little bit about that, or what? Yeah.
Well, she wrote it while she was like literally in her deathbed, and she wrote it as she was putting the pieces together of what she wanted to leave behind. So I think it's a really dark, beautiful look into the reality of becoming whole and realizing what wounds you want to heal in real time. So she was writing from a very raw place. So I've gotten the feedback that it is, it's a darker look at things, but it's a very honest look at things. And there's just, she's just such a good writer. And I just love knowing that her dream was to be a published author. And I helped her do that before she passed away. Yeah. That makes me happy. Isn't she the best? She was here today.
Yeah. So if you're watching on YouTube, that's
here.
why she's messing with me with that's why I changed the way that I look. You still look great though. So I'm glad that your equipment works.
Yeah, she's like, I'm gonna fuck with
totally.
Whatever
this guy is, who do you think he is? I'm gonna tell him.
Oh my God, you are so good at what you do, and you're such a good human. And I just people have been telling me like, oh, look, you're making the world better, and you're giving people permission to talk about uncomfortable things. But so are you, and the work you're doing is really important. So thank you.
And that's what you started with today. Like you like discomfort, and so I think leaning into that, you grow. And what we say is, growing pains are part of growth, and so you have to have pain to grow. So thank you all for tuning in. Nikki, thank you so much. I really appreciate you making the time to come here. I really, really appreciate you. So sadly, 1 in 3 women are diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. So in honor of Molly and those you may have lost to this disease, I encourage you all to listen to your body, advocate for yourselves, and push for early screenings. And like you said, a second or third opinion. It is so important we navigate and take control of our own health. Please visit cancer.org to learn more about early detection and annual screening. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you back next week. Until then, spread a little kindness and stay well.